Today's class, we're going to talk about fighting fair. Now, we know that most people argue when we're at home, but to no surprise, we also argue while we're separated. Fighting, or better yet, arguing, is normal and at times good, but only when it's done right. So fighting is something that we always do. I learned of a story of the president of the UFC, Dana White, and he had purchased the Ultimate Fighting Championship Association in the early 2000s for a small amount of money of what it's worth today. At that time, the UFC was seen as cruel and out of control. And that's because there was no rules. It wasn't fair. There were little guys fighting bigger guys that were professional boxers versus guys who were walking down the street. It was never fair. Low blows were allowed, eye gouging, pulling of the hair, throwing people out of the cage. Wherever it could be done, it was done. The bottom line is that the beginning of the UFC was not fair or clean. Dana White and the Suva brothers, who owned the UFC, knew that in order to make the UFC work, there had to be rules. It had to be fair, and it had to be regulated like any other professional sport. And just like in the UFC had to make changes on how they fought in order to be successful. So do we in our personal lives. Fighting with our loved ones has to be clean. It has to be fair. It has to be regulated by common goals. Otherwise, someone's going to get seriously hurt. I'd like to discuss with you briefly 9 steps for fighting fair. Step number 1. Fighting is not a public thing. We ask you to take it private and keep it private. Find a common ground to fight on. Fighting in front of children is nothing short of child abuse. Fighting in front of adults shows nothing but lack of self-control. Avoid fighting in common areas such as the living room, the dining room, the kitchen, and at meals. The best method to argue is in a common ground place such as your bedroom with the door closed. Step number 2. Be appropriate. Keep it relevant. Don't bring up old issues or sore points when they don't belong in that particular argument. Put boundaries around the subject matter so that the fight doesn't escalate into a free-for-all. Number 3, be realistic. Keep it real. Don't start breaking things and doing things that will eventually cost you money. Deal with the issue at hand, not with the symptom of the problem. Get real about what is bothering you. If not, you will come out of the exchange more frustrated than ever. The next point is fight to succeed, not to kill. Avoid character assassination. Stay focused on the issue, and don't get to the point of attacking your family member personally. Don't let the fight escalate into name calling. The next step is we ask you to be focused. Remain task orientated. Know what you want first before going into the disagreement or argument. If you don't have a goal in mind, you won't know when you have achieved it. So ask yourself the question, what are you arguing about? Where are you headed? What is the point? Next point is be a gentleman and be a lady. Allow your family member, your friend, or your partner, your spouse, to retreat with dignity. Recognize when someone is trying to end the argument with an apology or a joke or simply with limits. Don't push when the other person or you wants to quit or had enough. How an argument ends is crucial. Recognize when an olive branch is being extended to you, perhaps in the form of apology or joke, and give your partner a face-to-face gentleness actions. Don't elevate it to the next level. That's the next step. Be proportional in your intensity. Every single thing you disagree about is not the end of the earth. It's not a shattering event or an issue. Sometimes when you have the right to be mad and a right to argue, it does not mean you should. Take a step back and think of the previous steps that we've talked about. The next step, number 8, time is precious. Time is precious. There's a limit. Arguments should be temporary. They shouldn't last 3 or 4 days where we forget what we were arguing about. So don't let them get out of hand. Don't allow the ugliness of an argument to stretch out for a lifetime. Have you ever argued with someone for days and then you don't even know what the argument was about? You might not know or forget the topic, but the damage has already been done. And lastly, step number 9. Never or always is not the answer. Never say never, and always is not the answer in an argument. These are the things that people will remember after an argument. Rather than the topic, in a topic we'll use words such as never or always. Those are words that are considered infinitive. They can cause a lot of damage for years to come. So stay away from infinitive words. Never and always can have a lasting impact in your relationship. It would be easy to say during an argument, "I never loved you," or "You never help around the house," "I've always hated you," "I've always regret seeing you," or I can never stand you." Those are things that the other person will remember for years to come. In conclusion, fighting comes with a price. As we mentioned earlier, it is normal to argue or fight but with balances. Fight fair. Stay away from low blows to your family members. The likelihood of reconciling after a low blow during a fight is very difficult and very costly. Learn to fight fair. If one party wins the fight, the marriage or relationship has suffered. Learn goals, learn self-control, and learn loving words.